Annunciation Radio presents Say Yes to Life with Peter Range, Senior Fellow for Strategic Initiatives at the Center for Christian Virtue.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Say Yes to Life, where we learn to embrace our Catholic faith in the secular world. I'm your host, Peter Range, Senior Fellow for the Center for Christian Virtue, and welcome back to Say Yes to Life, where we continue to fight for every single human life, born, preborn, and yours in our world today. On today's show, we're excited to welcome Jennie Bradley Lichter, president of the March for Life. Jennie assumed the office of president of the March for Life Education and Defense Fund in February of 2025. In this capacity, she proudly directs the iconic organization committed to restoring a culture of life in the United States, most notably through the annual March for Life in Washington, D.C., held around the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, and through the growing State March for Life program. Jennie has a wide range of legal and policy experience in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, including at the highest levels of the federal government. During the first Trump administration, Jennie served in the White House as Deputy Assistant to the President and Deputy Director of the White House Domestic Policy Council, where she supervised rulemaking and policy efforts implicating a number of federal agencies and led policy initiatives across the federal government to defend the dignity of life. We need more Jennies in this world, is what we're saying. But anyway, prior to White House service, Jennie worked on policy issues in federal judicial, including the Supreme Court confirmation efforts in the Office of Legal Policy at the U.S. Department of Justice. Jennie graduated from the University of Notre Dame, go Irish, and from Harvard Law School, and earned a master's in philosophy and theology and religious studies from the University of Cambridge in the UK. She and her husband, Brian, have 3 young children who love attending the March for Life. Jennie and I are going to be talking about her life, her work, and the pro-life movement as a whole in just a minute. But first, let's go ahead and take 180 seconds around Ohio and the nation to talk about what's happening in the pro-life movement and the news. All right, first, from WTOL 11 in Toledo, I can't even believe that I'm going to say these words, but a Toledo man held his pregnant girlfriend down while she was sleeping to force crushed abortion pills down her throat. According to an investigation by the State Medical Board of Ohio, the Toledo man, Hassan James Abbas, he's actually a doctor, bought abortion pills online using his estranged wife's name, crushed them into powder, which he forced the victim to orally ingest while pinning her down. The unborn child did not survive. Abbas, 32, was placed on administrative leave from the University of Toledo Medical Center after the State Medical Board of Ohio suspended his license, citing, quote, clear and convincing evidence that he poses an immediate danger to patients. Now, what happened in this case? Well, December 18th, 2024, 4 a.m. in the morning, Abbas's girlfriend allegedly woke to find him physically on top of her and attempting to force a crushed powder into her mouth. She fought to get away, called 911. Abbas took the phone from her. She escaped the apartment and went to the emergency room where she received treatment but ultimately miscarried. Now, in an interview with the Ohio Medical Board in July of 2025, it notes you, by the way, the UTMC Medical Center continued to employ Abbas even though they knew about this. But the board said that Abbas admitted to researching and ordering mifepristone and misoprostol after learning his girlfriend was pregnant, using his estranged wife's personal identity to get the pills, crushing the abortion medication for it to dissolve more quickly, administering the crushed pills to his girlfriend, taking her phone and hanging up on the 911 call, and then throwing the remainder of the crushed pills out the window on his way to work. Folks, this is just a clear example of why the Trump administration and the FDA, they need to take immediate action to protect women and ensure this never happens again. Simply by restoring Obama-era regulations on the abortion pill, ensuring that women will see a doctor before even getting the pill. I mean, we want the pill outright banned, right? But just very simple things to protect the health of women so that men won't coerce or force the abortion pill down their throats. All right, secondly, from Life News. And sorry, that was a long update, but really important story happening out here at Toledo. From Life News, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops have elected a new president who is a solid pro-life advocate and defended denying communion to pro-abortion former Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Archbishop Archbishop Paul Coakley of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, has been elected as a new president, and he asked for prayers as he takes the leadership post, as he posted on X. Now, Coakley has been outspoken on pro-life issues, and as I mentioned before, said when Archbishop Cordileone from San Francisco denied Nancy Pelosi communion because of her pro-abortion stance, stopping and blocking a bill 80 times to stop infanticide. Thank you, Nancy Pelosi. He said, look, this is not right, and I support Archbishop Cordileone. So he's showing some courage, some things that we need to see from our episcopate and from priests all across the country. All right, third from Live Action, a report released by the Society for Assisted Reproductive Technology, SART, earlier this year exposed a dark reality of in vitro fertilization in adults' quest to create children. Most of the children they create using IVF will not survive. We've talked a lot about this on the show, but the breakdown of these numbers is just, it's heartbreaking. In 2023, there were 432,000 IVF cycles at 371 reporting clinics, but only 95,000 babies were born. These are rough rounding here. But that year, an estimated 1,946,000 embryos did not survive to be implanted, and another 1,759,000 were frozen, destroyed, donated to research, or released for embryo adoption. In comparison, there were 1,037,000 abortions in the U.S. in 2023. So we'll continue to talk about that. I'd love to dive more deeply into that. But on today's show, we got to get to Jennie Bradley Lichter. She's the president of the March for Life. Jennie, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us, and welcome to Say Yes to Life.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you, Peter.
Yeah, so let's just start with your story. Where'd you grow up? Tell us about your family and faith journey. Obviously, I'm incredibly impressed with your academic background, but how did you end up at the March for Life?
Sure. Okay, I'll try to make a long story somewhat short. I grew up primarily in South Bend, Indiana, go Irish, where my father was for many years until recently on the law school faculty at Notre Dame. So that's what brought my family to South Bend. I grew up around the university, attended the university, as did all 7 of my younger siblings.
Wow.
So Notre Dame has loomed large in my family's life. I came to D.C. Right after I graduated from college, almost by accident. And I share this long ago detail in my life, just because it's such a perfect example I can see now with the benefit of hindsight. It's the perfect example of God's providence working in ways that we sometimes don't and can't understand in the moment, right? I had been planning to go straight from college to a graduate program overseas to study theology and ultimately become a theology professor, is what I thought I was going to do and what I wanted to do. And I was very excited about that. I had been accepted to the program I wanted to be a part of at Cambridge in England. But at relatively the last minute, in other words, shortly before I graduated from college, I got a note from the professor at Cambridge with whom I was planning to do a very particular course of study. And he was letting me know that he had just been granted sabbatical for the following year, and he wasn't going to be at the university. And he more or less said, it doesn't make any sense for you to come here next year. There won't be anyone here who can supervise your particular research program. So please find something else to do and come to Cambridge in a year. So I graduated from college without a plan. My plan the rug had been pulled out from under me, and essentially just through networking and trying to get a job somewhere. And I had some friends coming from Notre Dame coming to DC who said, why don't you just come to Washington? There's all kinds of jobs in Washington. I was a philosophy and theology major, Peter. I knew nothing about politics or policy or really anything practical. I hadn't even ever been to DC other than for the March for Life and my senior class trip in high school. But I was able to land a job, an entry-level research assistant job at a conservative organization here in Washington. And that year changed the trajectory of my life. I saw all of the good people here in D.C. trying to get good things done for our country and for the cause of life and the cause of religious freedom and a lot of other things that I cared about a lot. And I felt like the vibe here was really exciting. Again, there just was a lot of possibility. And it was a presidential election year that I was here, and there was a Supreme Court vacancy. So a lot of things going on. But that's what led me to apply to law school. And what led me to ultimately decide, after I did go to England for my graduate program, I discerned pretty quickly that the active rather than contemplative life was the life for me, and came back to the U.S. I left my grad program to come back to the U.S. and go to law school, and then was oriented towards Washington and doing sort of policy and nonprofit litigation work from the very beginning. So I practiced law here in D.C. for about 15 years after graduating from Harvard. And I worked for church organizations. I was a lawyer at the Archdiocese of Washington. I was a lawyer at Catholic University here in DC. I served in the government for several years, as you mentioned, in the DOJ, and I took a break from practicing law to be a senior policy advisor in the Trump White House the first time around. And at every step, again, through this kind of meandering legal journey, the Lord knew what he was doing, because when the March for Life came calling about a year and a half ago, when they approached me, and I initially thought, oh gosh, I'm a lawyer. That's not what I do. And they must have the wrong person. And ultimately it just became clear to me very quickly once I brought it to the Lord in discernment that everything I had been learning and the experience I had been having and just the heart that had been growing in me since I was a kid, raised in a pro-life Catholic family, the heart for pro-life work and for babies and their moms just was all leading me to this particular season in my life, where I have really the very great privilege of being a part of the March for Life team, this organization that's given me and my family so much over the years. I'm very happy to now be able to give back to the pro-life movement by taking a turn as the caretaker of the beautiful, one-of-a-kind March for Life.
Yeah, what a tremendous story. Just curious, where did you meet your husband along the way?
He's a lawyer as well, and we met when we were young lawyers here in D.C. through mutual friends. So when I met him, he was a white-collar prosecutor at the Department of Justice.
Okay. Was it love at first sight, or did he have to win you over a little bit?
Well, it's funny, since we're since you're from the Midwest as well, I'll go ahead and share this, Peter. No, we met at a birthday party, and more or less it was love at first sight, in part because he grew up in Chicago, and this was a party full of anyway, we stood out as the two Midwesterners in this particular group of people, and sort of found each other right away for that reason. I think he was wearing a Chicago White Sox baseball hat, and that was my first sort of signal. And then as we started chatting just about our childhoods in the Midwest and how we both think Chicago is one of the greatest cities in the world, and what it's like to be in Washington as someone who grew up very far outside the Beltway in a very different setting and context, and trying to maintain those Midwestern core values here in the swamp, as they say, sometimes unfairly, but here in the swamp. That was really our initial point of connectivity, honestly, was just being two Midwestern kids, here in the big city, so to speak. And now we're raising our kids here inside the Beltway in Washington, but making sure they have a real dose of life outside of the Beltway as well, to ground them and connect them again to their roots in what some people call flyover country, and my husband and I call, the heart of America.
That's right. It's home. No doubt about it. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's always fascinating to hear the way that the Lord works in people's backgrounds. And, curious your thoughts on why you believe the National March for Life is still so incredibly important. You talked about all the great work that you've done and in the law and legal circles for the administration. And I mean, this is, it's amazing to go down to, but it's people just marching. I mean, so why is that still important?
It's so powerful. I love talking about this because my perspective, of course, is the perspective of a longtime marcher, right? Before I had the opportunity to stand on the stage for the first time this past year, and that's where I'll be this coming year as well, of course, emceeing the event. But I've been marching for a long time. And so between my own experience and all of the stories that people have entrusted to me in the past year or so, as I now represent the March for Life, as I travel and talk to folks, it's more clear to me than ever before how powerful the March for Life is in the pro-life movement and in the lives of individual people and people of faith, in particular, Catholics in particular. And there's a few reasons for that. One, the March for Life is, and has been for 50 years, so crucial for forming young people for lifelong pro-life mission. And that's my own story, coming to the March for the first time when I was 18. And I had been blessed with strong pro-life parents, but all of us hit that point, right? As is right and good, where you're sort of outgrowing the beliefs that you were raised with, not in the sense that you're necessarily leaving them behind, but you need to adopt them as your own, right? On that moment when you're on the cusp of adulthood. We all need to go through that and sort of, and recommit ourselves essentially, right, to the beliefs that we were raised with, if we were lucky enough to be raised by good parents. So that is the moment at which many people come to the March for Life for the first time. I mean, there's a reason that Catholic high schools and colleges and parish youth groups are deeply committed to bringing students by the busloads from all over this country. And it's because I think our faith leaders and our educators in the church also know that bringing students to the March for Life really gets into their hearts, because there is nothing like standing in a sea of people as far as the eye can see. I mean, it really feels like countless people, innumerable people when you're there, who are all there because we share a belief in the fundamental dignity of unborn human beings. And it's really important for young people to be reminded that this is not a fringe belief. You're not alone. You're not out on a limb by yourself, right? You are part of a great cloud of witnesses, of these faithful people who are all committed to the beauty and dignity of human life. So the march is really powerful for forming young people, and that's something you can't get can't get it in the same way other than through this kind of gathering experience, this collective gathering experience.
Amen.
Two, there are people who now I put myself in this category, but veteran marchers who have been coming for decades, right? I occasionally meet older folks who have more or less never missed a march in over 50 years, which is so powerful. It moves me to tears sometimes to hear their stories. But people keep coming back year after year to be reinvigorated, right? Those of us who work in the pro-life vineyard, and especially folks who work in places where they do feel like they're in a minority, right, in their beliefs in a minority, come to the March for Life to be reinvigorated. So the march every year over year, just refreshes the entire movement. And the presence of young people in this beautiful pro-life ecosystem is part of what encourages and reinvigorates us veterans, right? I am now far from 18 years old, but I love seeing all of the enthusiastic 18-year-olds at the March for Life every year. It makes me smile, and it just reconfirms my hope for the future of the pro-life movement. So that's number two. The march really reinvigorates the movement itself every year. And then number three, of course, is the outward facing or the public witness impact of the March for Life, which again, you can't get that just through online dialogue, as important and compelling as that is, especially in our day and age, or really through any other way. I mean, the March for Life shuts down the center of the most powerful city in the world every January on behalf of the unborn, and has been doing that every year for over 50 years. I mean, as far as I know, there's no other social movement in American history that has been able to maintain the persistence and the doggedness and the hopefulness, relatedly, of the pro-life movement. And that in itself is a really powerful witness, And here in Washington, there is some sense, of course, from some of the secular folks and people who don't share our beliefs or the mainstream media of like, oh, those pro-lifers are back again. And you know what? We are. They're going to be back every single year until our work is done, and it's not done. And so the March for Life is such a powerful witness that our political leaders and our media elites and our cultural elites and really all of our fellow Americans take note of and have to take note of, because it really is, it's one of one. There truly is nothing like the March for Life. And that power of public witness, again, you can only get through a massive in-person gathering that has momentum and staying power like nothing else in history.
Well said, Jenny. And it was myself as a 21-year-old going on my first March for Life that literally changed my life. I mean, it was I was a junior at John Carroll University. Came down. I met a homeless man, actually, of all things. He had a sign that said, "Am I not life too?" with a question mark on it. I went over and I was like, oh, my goodness. So stopped by. And long story short, after about 2 hours, he grabbed me and pulled me right up to his face and said, "Peter, you have a purpose and mission in life, and you will fulfill it." And I've never forgotten that moment. And every time I go out and I give a public speech or talk, I look at everybody in the audience and I remind them what Dre reminded me of, that they have a purpose, that they have a mission in life, and that they will fulfill it. I really think it was an encounter with an angel, and that was made possible because the March for Life, year in and year out, goes and stands up for the least among us. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for continuing the tradition of the March for Life. Now, you guys have pivoted a little bit to focus on these state marches. I'm just looking online now from Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Ohio, of course, each and every year. Why is the state marches for life important to the March for Life as an organization as a whole?
Well, they're so important, especially in the few years after Dobbs. But what's incredible is that the state march program, the March for Life state march program, actually launched even prior to Dobbs. So again, that's just another moment of providential, if not prophetic, foresight by my predecessors. I can't take any credit for that, but by my predecessors and by the organization's board, around 2019 or so, I think was the first one in Virginia. And it was just this instinct that, it is so important to be present in the states, in part because some people can't make it all the way to Washington in January. There are all sorts of reasons that in any given year that doesn't always work for folks. But also to be present to speak to our state legislatures and our state culture, right? The cultural landscape as well as the political landscape in the states, as well as we do at the national level. So that was the insight that launched our state march program. And of course, after the Dobbs decision, where the ability, the opportunity that state legislators now have for better or for ill, depending on how they exercise it. But the opportunity to legislate around life issues is now firmly in the hands of our elected officials, especially at the state level. So it really is more important than ever that state and local pro-life communities are really speaking loudly and making themselves visible in their state capitals. So that's the core insight that drives the program. And you're exactly right. In just a few years, this program has exploded, and we are truly present now from coast to coast in red states and in blue states. And it has been really one of the greatest pleasures and joys for me of stepping into my role here is having an opportunity to travel to our state marches. I don't make it to every single one because I do have kids at home, and I try to be present with them as much as I can. But I have made it to a number of our state marches this year, and they are so inspiring. They're like little microcosms of the National March, right? So have all of the same benefits that we just discussed that the National March has, but they feel like family events in a way that the National March does, but not quite as much because it's so much bigger, right? And more diverse. But at the state level, it's really neat to see. I have loved seeing how each individual state march, the marcher community has a little bit of a different flavor. In some states, there are lots and lots of kids there with their parents. In other states, there's a huge off-the-charts presence of high school students. In one state that I was in this year, there were a number of seminary groups that came, and that was really neat too. It's just so cool to be reminded across our great country, there really is something to localism and federalism, right? We're not a monolith. We are really a patchwork quilt of different communities that all have a little bit of different flavors, a little bit of a different emphasis, respond differently to different types of speakers. And at the state level, through the state marches, we're able to be responsive to that. But of course, all of those state level pro-life communities are knit together by, again, the same core shared belief in the dignity of every human person. So I find them so inspiring. And Ohio, you probably remember, Peter, the Ohio March for Life last year in 2024 was my very first state March for Life shortly after I was chosen for this position. And so that Ohio will always just have a special place in my heart because that day last fall was absolutely awesome and really just introduced me to how powerful and impactful and honestly fun our state marches are.
Yeah, well, Jennie, I can tell you that you were a Midwesterner from the start, so you're welcome back anytime to the great state of Ohio.
Thank
and it's practicing that Catholic social principle of subsidiarity. Local issues best handled by local people, and so to get people engaged. In so many folks that I do meet at the Ohio March for Life, like I can't make it down to D.C., but at least I can make it here to Columbus. So tremendous opportunity to 100%. Witness for life here in the state of Ohio. It's the first Friday of every October if you want to put it on your schedule for 2026. But Jennie, I asked this question almost for my own benefit because I can be you heard my 180 seconds around the country, such a Debbie Downer at times with things that are going on. But what has you excited about the pro-life movement? And, in your view, what's to come for the next few years for our movement? We've had some setbacks, obviously. We've had them here in Ohio, but we're not giving up. But what are you seeing?
Yeah, it's a good question. And you're exactly right. The way you sort of teed up this conversation is sobering because it reminds us how much work we have to do. And I remind myself and I remind my team here at the March that the business we're about is it's serious business, but it's ultimately at the heart of it is the joy of the gift of life, right? And so we can never give in to discouragement. We know that life is victorious in the end. And we know that we are fighting for a just and righteous cause. So we always need to keep our chins up. Don't give in to discouragement. Don't give in to anger, which is, not a terribly healthy register in which to be living. But I have to say, righteous anger has its place, right? Like Christ with the money changers in the temple. And a story like that medical resident in Toledo drugging his girlfriend really makes me angry. And I believe we should all be righteously angry about that kind of story. And that is made possible very directly by the current policies or lack thereof surrounding access to the chemical abortion pill, exactly like you said. So that is frustrating to see. However, in the midst of all of this, these cultural and political and policy challenges and the widespread, the abortions are too easily available, even in pro-life states because of mail order abortion pills. But being at our state marches and at our national march and kind of being immersed in this work now, I can't help but just be filled with hope, especially because of how on fire Gen Z is for life. And I'm sure you see that in your work in Ohio, or I imagine you do. And I certainly have seen it being out on the road this year and just being part of the conversation, whether it's online, in person. When I walk around Capitol Hill and I introduce myself, if I'm walking into a meeting with a senator, the scheduler will jump out of her chair and say, I grew up coming to the March for Life, and it's the reason I'm working here in the Senate, right? Or people will say to me, I came to the March for Life one time years ago, and it's still feeding me, and that's why I do the work that I do. So we have all of these anecdotes about how on fire young people are. I have seen it in the last few months at our marches this fall in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in New Jersey, in Michigan, where hundreds, and if not in some places thousands of high school students are there and are totally on fire for life. It's really beautiful to see. And then we pair that with, we kind of zoom out and look at the macro level, really powerful and inspiring polling data from over the summer, just a few months ago, about how Gen Z self-identification is starting to swing hard back towards more Gen Zers calling themselves pro-life. And I think that's really indicative, right, that it's not a label that young people are uncomfortable with anymore. And thanks be to God for that. And that young people are really seeing through a lot of the lies that have been told by the mainstream media and the abortion industry and all of the folks who have been talking about how abortion is safe and, all of these sorts of things. I think young people really see through that in a big way, and they're craving truth-telling and authenticity and bold witness and an affirmation of the goodness, the fundamental goodness of parenthood and a family life. And all of those things are so just deeply and profoundly inspiring for me. And I give thanks to God that I have the privilege of working not only in the pro-life movement, but specifically for an organization that in a lot of ways is of and for young people. Yeah. Again, like the March for Life is fundamentally a young person's event. Everyone is welcome. And there are plenty of folks like me, again, veteran marchers there too in any given year, but the energy really comes from young people. And that is such a gift, just seeing kind of where this younger generation is heading on life. Abortion will be eradicated in this country. I'm very sure of it, because that's what we're seeing from young people.
Amen. Folks, we've been talking with Jennie Bradley Lichter, president of the March for Life. And unfortunately, we only got about a minute left here in the show, Jennie. I'd love to have you back on so we can talk a little bit about, what do you think is at the core of this issue of life? It's a big question, though, probably not something we can handle in a minute.
Yeah.
So where can people go for just more information on the March for Life, and they can be aware of when their maybe local state march is going to be happening as well?
Sure, thank you. So please check out our website, which is marchforlife.org, and you'll see all the information you need about our National March for Life coming up in January, as well as a list of our upcoming state marches. We're done for this year, but we'll be back out in the state starting early in 2026. So would love to see all of the listeners of this wonderful program at a state march near you or at the National March. And next time, Peter, we'll talk about the root causes of abortion, because you're right, that could be a whole separate conversation, a lot to say about that. But again, good news on the horizon. The Lord is working. The Holy Spirit is on the move in our country, and we can take a lot of solace and hope in that.
Thanks be to God. Thank you so much, Jennie, for joining us, and keep saying yes to life, folks. We'll talk to you next week. Continue the fight. We will win in Jesus' name. Thanks so much.